Bill and I are here at the United Nations Week really talking about these goals that the UN set several years ago to try and make the world a more peaceful and prosperous place. And so we've created an event called Goalkeepers, which is really to talk about these goals and what's achievable between now and 2030 so that people really understand them and know that we actually are making progress towards those goals, but that progress is not inevitable.
What goals?
So these goals were set by the United Nations, and they are around having a sustainable planet, making sure we solve climate change, making sure we bring down maternal mortality, women's empowerment, bringing down childhood mortality. Those are the goals, the Sustainable Development Goals set by the United Nations, the 169 nations.
Today, we create heroes of ordinary people with extraordinary stories.
And how does your organisation help to try to achieve that, and how are you doing?
Well, we are in partnership with many, many governments around the world, the UK government included, France, Germany, Norway, many African governments, the Indian government, to try and work on some of the very specific goals. That is, we work on bringing down maternal mortality, we bring down childhood mortality. One of the greatest things that have happened because of the previous goals set by the United Nations, the Millennium Development Goals, is that really childhood mortality, that is the number of deaths of children under the age of 5, has been cut in half since 1990, in half. That is huge progress as a world. So our foundation works in partnership with many governments and other NGOs on the ground to create new vaccines and deliver them, or to deliver, for instance, bed nets.
I was speaking to one of your colleagues earlier who was pointing out to me that the population in places like Nigeria is going to be higher than what it is in the United States.
Right. So one of the things that Bill and I are highlighting today at this goalkeeper session here at the United Nations Week is that we need to really pay attention to the youth population and the growing number of youth on the continent of Africa. And it hangs in the balance. If we help them lift themselves up, there's unbelievable potential there for them to change their countries and their continent. But however, if we don't make the investments the world has made in the past around vaccines or malarial bed nets or other tools, then they're going to stay in poverty, and we're going to have more people in poverty than we've had in the past. And so we want to make sure that the world goes towards the youth potential. One of the huge things that our foundation is behind, along with the British government and many others, is making sure, for instance, that women and girls have access to contraceptives. There are 214 million women asking us around the globe for contraceptives. And if we give them the tool that many women in the UK use, or the tools that women in the United States use, they can then choose if and when to have children. And if they space the births of their children are likely to grow up more healthy, and the family's more likely to be wealthy. We know that from great research over time.
How are you judging success? What is success for the organisation in countries like Nigeria, sub-Saharan Africa?
Well, we look at a whole number of things around these Sustainable Development Goals. We look at, is nutrition getting better for children? That is, and we can measure that by saying how many children are stunted. Well, the stunting number is actually coming down around the world. One of the countries that's done the best on nutrition programs is Brazil. Their stunting rate was cut dramatically in the last 20 years. We can take the lessons from Brazil, and we're applying those in places like Nigeria. Ethiopia's had a steady decline in stunting. They're the second largest population on the continent of Africa. So we look at all kinds of issues, of measures. We look at stunting, we look at contraceptives in the hands of women and used, we look at malarial bed nets delivered and how the deaths are coming down from that. So we have a whole host of indicators that we follow, as well as those countries follow. I mean, they're the ones doing the work, they're the ones reporting the data. And I think our job as philanthropists and as government, as high-income governments, is to help take the tools and the innovations from our countries, or the tools and innovations that they're creating in their own countries, and make sure those come forward and get into everybody's hands.
What do you think about what the President said? His view was that countries that are less fortunate than the United States will not be benefiting from foreign aid unless they offer more respect to the US. How do you feel about that?
Well, luckily the President proposes a budget and Congress disposes the money. And I think we have a pretty enlightened Congress about our foreign aid dollars, and We have not, in a very long time as a country, tied those foreign aid dollars to specific statements like that. And I believe that, you have to spend foreign aid dollars wisely, and you have to spend them where the greatest disease and disability exists. And so that hasn't happened in the past, in the recent past, and so I'm still encouraged. One of the things that I think this administration does care about is that the money's actually spent well, and there are discussions you can have from a business perspective of, if you look at the data, these are the places you ought to invest.
He was openly laughed at UNGA, wasn't he? How does that make you feel as an American?
I think we need to have really good leadership in the world. And I'm encouraged when I see people like President Macron showing forward leadership. To me, that is what the best of democracy stands for. And so those are the types of words I'd like to hear from our U.S. president that we are not hearing today.
Can we talk briefly about your children?
Sure.
Do they want to follow in your footsteps?
So the thing that Bill and I have encouraged all three of our children to do, we have 2 daughters and a son,
Right, indeed,
is to follow their own dreams and their own potential. So they're still figuring out what they want to do. We have a daughter who's out of college, a son who just entered college, and another daughter who's in secondary school. So we'll see what they want to do.
What sort of support do you, I can't remember, was it Mr. Buffett who said that he wasn't, or was it Zuckerberg who said that he wasn't going to leave any of his money to his children? They had to continue on their own path and make their own way. Do you do that with yours?
So Warren has actually changed a bit what he's done with his own children over time. And so I think those discussions about money are actually very private inside of a family and should be kept that way. Mm-hmm. But I will say this, Bill and I made statements that the vast majority of the resources that have come from Microsoft will go back to society. And I think all the other discussions about money, one of the things the kids and I talked about when they were young is they did get an allowance, they had chores, they had allowance. And our agreement was between them and me, they were never allowed to tell anybody else what their allowance was, and neither was I. Because everybody would think it's either too much money, oh my gosh, the Gates kids get that much money, or that's all the Gates kids get. So I think money discussions amongst a family should remain private inside a family.
What sort of chores did they have to do?
Oh my gosh, they do dishes and take the garbage out. I mean, the things that other kids do.
Absolutely. Microsoft changed the world. Do you see it as nothing but a force for good?
I think that the products Microsoft has created absolutely changed the world and changed the world for the better. Now, any tool that you can create can be used for good or not for good. But yeah, I think it's been an incredible force for good in the world. You bet.
You won't know, there's a lady in the United Kingdom who has young children, and she decided that she was going to smash the iPads of the kids because they were spending too much time on tablets. In the UK, it's a big deal at the moment. What about here in the United States? Well,
one good thing is an iPad is not a Microsoft product,
no.
So more power to her.
Exactly.
I'm just kidding.
I think you get my point.
Yeah, I get your point. So I think that's the role of a parent, right? When I was growing up, my parents had rules about how much my sister and I, my brothers, got to use the phone, right? I mean, we had 2 phones in our house. And,
oh, you were posh.
Yeah, we felt posh. In fact, we had 2 phones in our house, with that long line, and we had to decide on the telephone cord who got to take it in their room and for how long. But we had rules around that. I wasn't allowed to speak on the phone all night long to my friends. And so I think it's up to parents to have rules around their kids that are age appropriate for their children around technology. You wouldn't just put a computer in a child's hands right away. I do see parents making that mistake, but I think there are if you talk to parents who've been through this journey or are living it now, the ones who are doing the best are putting rules around technology at different age-appropriate levels and then opening it up over time. It's like any tool. You have to learn how to use it.
What's a good day for you?
A good day for me is when I have a little bit of quiet time in the morning, get up early, get some exercise in, particularly outdoors. The Seattle weather's a lot like the weather in the UK. So I love when it's sunny and I can go outdoors and exercise. And then getting time with friends and with my kids and with Bill, and then getting to do the work that I love. And this work that we're doing around the world is work that I absolutely love.
And how do you find time to relax, and what do you do? I read that you're a big fan of The Crown.
We are big fans of The Crown, and Bill and I don't move forward in the series without the other one. So if one of us is traveling, we have to wait for the other one to come home. So we do that. Bill likes to play a lot of tennis. I play a little bit of tennis. I like to go jogging. We like to kayak together. There's a game you might not have heard about. It's becoming more popular in the United States, but called pickleball. It's a racket sport, and we play that together.
We have a campaign Sky News are running at the moment, which involves us wanting our leaders, political leaders, to have a debate like you do. You have lots of debates leading up to the presidential elections. We don't have that in law in the United Kingdom at the moment. Do you think it's a good idea that political leaders should have to face the public and be questioned ahead of an election campaign?
Definitely. I think it's a good part of the democratic process. You get to see how a leader thinks on his or her feet. You get to see what they're passionate about in terms of their answers. And it gives the chance for the public to really see the leader in action before electing him or her.
Good to talk to you. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thanks for your time.
Thank you. Absolutely fascinating stuff. Still to come on the Kay Burley Show, live from New York City for you. Going to be speaking to the Foreign Secretary, Jeremy Hunt, about everything from President Trump, Brexit, and the progress of negotiations to release Nazanin Zaghari Ratcliffe. That to come.